Hi there, everybody. Just a bit of a reaction to Stockport County's 3-1 victory at Harrogate Town yesterday. I think it was a really dominant second half display from Stockport. Probably a 6 out of 10 first half performance and maybe an 8 out of 10 second half. I didn't think they. To an extent, I think there was probably an extra gear in Stockport, especially in terms of their first half performance, and it felt a little bit like they didn't necessarily need to find that. And I do have a feeling that there's a certain weakness in this Stockport County side where Harrogate actually came out in the first 10 minutes with a pretty good shape. You had Josh Marks pressing with Matty Daly, and I think at that point, the problem Stockport had was that they don't really have a number six who can drop in, collect the ball off the defence, and sort of beat the press and get moves going from there. Now, I think that's less of a problem when Stockport have a back three, which Dave Challinor is obviously renowned for his favouring a 3-5-2 system. In there, you sort of number six who drops in kind of gets in the way a little bit sometimes. But I think when you play with a back four, I think that's really important. I would say you need three players who are capable of progressing the ball from your defensive third, especially in the early stages of build-up. And I'm not sure Stockport had that. Maybe you could argue Akil Wright, Fraser Horsfall, and Pye, but I felt like there was a bit of an issue in the sense that you had Macaulay Southam Hales at right back. And I think he's at his best when he's flying forward. And he did that a couple of times in the first half. Quick long throw in for the goal as well. Really quick thinking there, which you praise him. Probably one of the bright spots in the first half, and linked up well with Louis Barry in the second half. But I think probably the downside of Southern Hales is that I don't think he's someone who can progress the ball from deep. I think he's more effective when he gets higher up the pitch. And I think that at certain moments that can be a problem for Stockport because without Carl Wootton, they have been trying to play a little bit more on the deck. And listen, it's brought them incredible success the way that they've played. However, I also think that there's a limitation to that because Ryan Crowsdale, when he drops in, he's just not very technical. And I suppose, to be honest, I don't think he's necessarily shown the willingness to drop in and collect the ball in the first place. I don't think he's got that. I think he's brave in other ways, shall we say. So I do think that's a weakness for Stockport. And I think if you're an opposition team, you'd get some encouragement by saying, can we press with a sort of mid-block and leave the back four to sort of pass the ball amongst themselves? Of those, I think you've got Akil Wright, who's probably progressive. I don't see Macca Southern Hales being that pet player for the reasons I've mentioned. I'm not sure Fraser Horsfall is. And Pye, I think he's okay in possession. But I do worry that once Stockport face that next challenge, and that next challenge might not come in League Two. It might be that the template that they've got is more than good enough to get them into the top three. In fact, right now, if you ask me, I probably would put them in my top three. But maybe in January or possibly next season, if they do go up into League One, I do think that's probably a challenge that they're going to have to overcome. Whether that's through them going back to a three at the back and not having a number six is as big of a problem, because the whole idea of the back three is that the wide centre back spread out and you can get some lovely angles from that. With the back four, I don't think they really have that. So that's a sort of a minor criticism from the sort of way they started. But I think probably the reason why that didn't become the sort of headline for Stockport County, if you like, was because they scored early. And listen, it was a great bit of movement from Anthony Sarcevic and quick thinking, as I mentioned, from Southern Hales, just from that throw-in. And it kind of deceived Liam Gibson and Dean Cornelius. And I suppose that's where you'd probably say from the Harrogate perspective, they weren't they weren't switched on enough. They sort of seemed to be boxing Gibson. No, seemed to be boxing Sarcevic, and there might have been one of the Stockport players there into this box corner as if them being there meant they couldn't get out. And actually, that's not the case. And I think you've got to be a lot more alert. And I suppose while I'm on the subject of Cornelius and Gibson, Cornelius had won sort of individual accolades for his work in Scotland. I think he was in the Scottish Premiership, won Young Player of the Year in 21-22. Liam Gibson was Player of the Year last season for Morecambe. I want to see that Liam Gibson, to be honest with you. I felt a little bit as well. There was one moment where there's a diagonal over to Gibson, and because he had missed a couple of the diagonals previously, there was almost an ironic cheer for him. And you don't like to see that so much because, you like the idea of fans sort of supporting the players. But I suppose that maybe encapsulates where Liam Gibson is at the moment, because I've always associated Liam Gibson, first of all, his versatility. He's incredibly tenacious. He played as a destroyer in midfield for Morecambe last season when they sort of needed that type of presence, as well as being primarily a left back. But it feels like there's an energy that was in his game for Morecambe last season that's kind of gone a bit at Harrogate. I'm not quite sure why that is. And listen, maybe someone will tell me I'm wrong, but from what comments have been saying about his start to life at Harrogate and people I've spoken to, it seems like there's probably some truth to that, and hopefully Liam Gibson, whatever the issue is, hopefully he can find his form again, because I would have expected big things from him this season, and still do to an extent, but he definitely needs to up his game, I think. And again, and same with Cornelius, by the way. He was another one that I thought, wow, Harrogate have recruited really well. And I don't really see what Cornelius has offered, to be honest. Now, I've only seen the one game for 90 minutes. But again, similar to the Gibson issue, there's been other people who have been saying, based on his form previously, that he's not been at the level Harrogate have been hoping for. And it's like, what are we describing Cornelius as? Because he doesn't seem to have that box-to-box energy. I think his passing is a little bit sort of sideways and simplistic. I struggle to really pinpoint his USP, and I suppose that's the challenge for Cornelius. And I suppose this theme for Harrogate of on paper they recruited so well. Now, obviously, Rob McDonald is a huge miss. He was another signing I was really excited about. I think he was missed massively on Saturday because, I think Warren Burrell, and I suppose this comes onto a theme with Harrogate, where players who have kind of been part of the club's rise up the leagues, Warren Burrell, Josh Falkingham, George Thompson, I don't see them as players who are necessarily at the level Harrogate are going to need if they want to keep moving forward. And by the way, the league itself is getting stronger. So I kind of worry where you have this situation where you've got a core of players for Harrogate who have a career history of playing in the lower leagues, who aren't getting any younger. And you do wonder whether there's that risk of stagnation a little bit from that core of players, and who's going to step up to the mantle. And I suppose the issues that we've got with Cornelius and Gibson not being necessarily what we were hoping for, that probably compounds the problems. I think on a positive note for Harrogate, Matty Daly was really impressive. Played some lovely through balls, and I'd like to see, to be honest, I don't think we really got the chance to see everything that Matty Daly can do, because he was playing in a size that wasn't at its best collectively, I think it's fair to say. And obviously Harrogate against Stockport, you're always going to be struggling a little bit. So maybe he didn't have as many opportunities to sort of get on the ball in the final third and show what he could do. But I think when he did, played a lovely through ball for in the lead up to the penalty, and Josh March as well hit the crossbar early on. Got to remember that. Like if that had gone in, that a goalless, that could have made a real difference. I think Obviously, I mentioned McDonald is a miss for Harrogate, and I think possibly Levi Sutton as well. I think Sutton's got that bit of dynamism about him that could make a real difference to Harrogate's midfield, which is looking a little bit uninspiring at the moment to my eyes. And Again, I think they went in 1-0 down at half time. I don't think Stockport had to be brilliant in that first half, to be honest with you. I think what Stockport did well in that first half was sort of close Harrogate down well once they got into a certain area. And for that, I would certainly give Ryan Croasdale a lot of credit. Likewise, Will Collar, likewise Sarcevic, who started the press. Likewise, Odin Bailey, who I thought did a really good job on that left-hand side and probably came into it even more in that second half when he hit the bar as well. But I think what kind of worries me is that Harrogate, they ended up dropping even deeper at the start of the second half than they were at the start of the first half when it was goalless. And with that in mind, I'm a little bit surprised that it took until 67 minutes for Simon Weaver to make a change, and bringing on Jack Muldoon for up top. Let me just find it. Yeah, it was Jack Muldoon on for Josh March after Sam Follerin had come on for James Daly. I think the fact it was Jack Muldoon rather than Luke Armstrong, it felt a little bit like Simon Weaver. Listen, I don't know, but it sort of comes across as though the fact Luke Armstrong was on the bench suggests there was no question mark about fitness. Was there an element of Simon Weaver had no intention of actually giving Luke Armstrong any minutes, but instead wanted to have him on the bench and then give him the sort of the embarrassment of Jack Muldoon coming on rather than him because he wanted to sort of make a bit of a point to the fans, murmurings of a falling out. That's kind of how I can't help but read it, because there must be some sort of dispute, because you're in a situation where you need goals. And Simon Weaver has spoken previously. I've had him on my show in the past where even when Luke Armstrong hasn't been in great form previously, I think maybe the 21-22 season, I think his form was a little bit streaky and patchy perhaps. There was that feeling that he was always the first name on the team sheet and it was about creating for him. So for a long time, Simon Weaver has been really loyal to Luke Armstrong, and I suppose you'd say he vindicated that last season. And then maybe the circumstances of how the move, firstly, the circumstances of how the move to Wrexham on deadline day broke down. Because of a paperwork issue, and possibly, I think when a move breaks down, it's always a difficult situation for the player. Do you know what? I think if I was in Luke's situation and I'd wanted a move and it had broken down, I would almost be even more determined that between September and January, I would give absolutely everything, almost more than I would have done beforehand, because I'd want to challenge the sort of perception that the fact my move has broken down has influenced my motivation. That would almost raise it for me. And I do what I think it's quite clear to me that that hasn't been the case with Luke Armstrong, that he hasn't been motivated in quite the same way, and it's actually gone the other way where he's and listen, I'm speaking from a point of view for someone who isn't around the dressing room or the training ground every day, but it does seem like, in terms of performances and from what people have been saying, that Luke Armstrong's motivation has dropped a little bit as a result of not getting the moves that he wanted. And from that point of view, I can understand why Simon Weaver might be disappointed. Whether the solution there would be to actually not put him on the bench, not put him in the matchday squad at all, rather than sort of create this. It feels like there's an element of political moves at play there. Could be completely wrong about that, by the way, but it feels like, if you're in a situation where you need a goal, you're 2-3-0 down, surely you bring on Luke Armstrong if all's well behind the scenes. So that's what I can't help but draw from that one. I also felt that as a consequence of Harrogate dropping deeper at the start of the second half, Um, a bit short of outlets. Now, I think part of the issue was that James Daly would normally be the outlet, and he was up against Macca Southern Hales, who's very quick and enjoy those 1v1 duels. So maybe that was part of the problem. But then I did feel like Harrogate were missing Sam Follerin and the direct running that he can provide and the ability to carry a team up the pitch. And yeah, I do wonder whether Follerin could have been brought on earlier. Yeah, and whether him coming on would have given Harrogate more time. I think he made a couple of runs when he did come on. Not say that he sort of changed the game necessarily, but yeah, could that substitution have been made a little bit earlier? I would have said possibly. Obviously, it's very easy to say that when you're sort of watching from afar and you're not there in the dugout. And yeah, maybe there could have been different reasons for that, but that would have been my sort of perception of it. I thought George Thompson, again, he's one of those core of players that I just kind of I wonder about whether they can take Harrogate forward, and they're going to need to continue to progress if they want to sort of stabilise in this league, even because it is getting stronger. I suppose we'll go back to Stockport now, and Louis Barry was quiet in the first half, and I think that was partly because there was quite a big intention from Stockport to nullify Kane Ramsey, because they had spotted that Ramsey, he's a real athlete. He's added a bit of productivity to his game this season. He was a really dangerous right back to try and stop, as opposed to Gibson, who's out of form. So actually, I think the way Stockport played, they actually wanted to nullify. So their more attacking players were sort of shifted more towards the left. So you had Odin Bailey on the left of the diamond, Sartovic pressing kind of towards the left. Barry was on the left as well. And maybe this kind of meant that this kind of sacrificed Barry as an attacking force, because rather than being in those 1v1 scenarios, which he absolutely loves, he was kind of in the more crowded areas, and actually it was a case of switching the ball to the other side, where it would be Collar and Southern Hales. And probably the same in possession, where Harrogate felt like they had to sort of Stockport kind of funneled the ball across to the left rather than allowing Harrogate to build up through the right, which is kind of what they wanted. So it was kind of like a bit of a lopsided shape. So the more attacking Stockport players were towards the left, and then you had Collar and Croasdale shifted a bit more towards the right. But yeah, and I think Louis Barry kind of struggled as an individual attacking entity because of that in the first half, and then in the second half there was a bit of a tactical shift, I would say, where Barry actually moved to the right, and that was where he had a lot of fun. I think again caused Liam Gibson a lot of problems, and then all of a sudden in the blink of an eye he was sort of running at Warren Burrell, and then the ball was in the net, and I think that's just shows you in 20-minute period. Louis Barry only needs 20-minute periods to be really effective, and I think that's why Stockport are just such a dangerous side. And I think with Isaac Oliaf, I don't think Oliaf was necessarily at his absolute best on Saturday, but I think you could still see flashes of why he's such a dangerous forward, because he has that ability to sort of shield the ball while sort of backing into players and sort of almost running backwards and bringing others into play. Obviously, I think he's not going to win many aerial duels. That's probably where he struggles a bit, and that's where Dave Challinor might have a bit of work to sort of fine tune things. But yeah, I think you can see Isaac Oliaf's dangerous, and I think Carl Wootton coming in is only going to add to Stockport's strength. I thought Akil Wright played well. I know there was a few comments that he misplaced one or two passes. But I think that was partly a reflection of not having a number 6 who Stockport can go to. And I thought Akil Wright was probably the most progressive defender Stockport had on the pitch. He was sort of the one trying to open things up. And I actually thought he defended really well as well. I thought he was really aggressive. And sort of used his athleticism well, so I'd give him credit for that. Horsfall, I think, made a really important block in the first half, and Ben Hinchliffe made a good stop early in the second. So, listen, I think Stockport do have one or two imperfections to iron out. I think it'd be wrong for them to think that they can kind of just coast to promotion now, because they've still got to work on certain things. However, I still think that yesterday was a real sign of the their promotion credentials, because even when 6 out of 10 first half, 8 out of 10 second, it wasn't necessarily a dominant 90-minute performance. But in another way, you could still see that in terms of fitness, in terms of strength, physicality, and in terms of quality, there were streets ahead of Harrogate Town. And Harrogate, I thought O'Connor played well, but I think with Kane Ramsey nullified, um, and other than Matty Daly and Josh March, who I think both had good games individually, I think there's a lot of question marks about Harrogate. And while there's other poor teams in the league that might mean that the stability Harrogate have could see them stay up, I'm also a little bit worried about them. I could see them dropping into relegation danger. But well done to Stockport County. They're top of the league. They've won their last 7 league games, and they look quite the contender, don't they?